In this episode, we're going to get a little woo-woo. We're going to talk about dreams and dream analysis. I'm going to share a quote from my favorite book, and I'm going to talk to you about my favorite word at the moment. I'm Angus Pyke, and welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. This is another bonus episode. We're talking further about leadership. But first of all, how are you? How are things going in your part of the world? I know it's very different. I'm having so many heartfelt, wonderful conversations with you from all around the globe. Some of you in lockdown, and many of you like us here in Australia, we're still able to serve our patients. Now, I wanted to start this episode today, and I wanted to share a quote with you. At the moment, I'm reading a book called Untamed. It's written by Glennon Doyle. I think that's her name. I'll make sure it's in the show notes from there. It is one of the more profound books that I've read, certainly this year, but it is only March, but maybe over the last 5 or so. And I want to read a quote from you. There are many of you out there at the moment, and many of my patients, but many of us as practitioners, that are really beating yourself up for how you're feeling. I get to have a nightly chat with my beautiful wife, Lauren, who's a chiropractor also, if you weren't aware, and gives herself a hard time because of the roller coaster that she's on at the moment, depending on what's going with the practice, the patients that she's serving. She has good days and she has bad days, and times where she feels quite fearful about what's going on, and times where she feels like she's got it all here too. And I want to read a quote that might help you perhaps stop beating yourself up a little bit here too. So forgive me while I get this open here as well. It goes like this. If you're uncomfortable, in deep pain, if you're angry, yearning, confused, you don't have a problem, you have a life. Being human is not hard because you're doing it wrong. It's hard because you're doing it right. You'll never change the fact that being human is hard, so you must change the idea that it was ever meant to be easy. I think about that quote a lot, and I only read it a couple of weeks ago, and as I was reading in my Kindle, I remember highlighting it there as well. Too often, for many of us, and myself included, in the very early beginning phases of these extra episodes, I talked about my tendency to get a bit Pollyanna inside of this. So many of us as natural health practitioners, one of the things I love about the chiropractic profession is our ability to be able to put a positive spin on anything, for us to reframe it, for us to focus somewhere different. And that definitely has its upsides. But sometimes for me, what that means that if I ever happen to have a low moment, if I'm ever having to find things are difficult at the times they're too, I then feel like I've got a problem. Like, why can't I feel okay about this? And I get that message from many of you at the moment. And we're not always doing a great job at sharing that we're struggling. And it's okay. If you're feeling overwhelmed at the moment, then no, that's totally okay. There are absolutely moments where I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I can sit in it and I can be present with it. And invariably when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can sit and there's some really wacky thing that's going on inside of my head. I'm having a conversation with myself where I'm making things be bigger than what they need to be. In the previous episode, I talked about the concept of learned helplessness, and that invariably when I'm freaking out about things, I'm making things personal, be about me. I'm making them be pervasive or I'm making them be permanent. This morning I was having a chat with a beautiful patient of mine, Danielle, who's worked in international aid for years. She's very, very good at what she was doing. And a part of the conversation, she said a word to me that has really changed me. She said, "This is temporary." That word temporary. Now that doesn't mean, I don't know that it's going to be 2 weeks temporary or 2 months temporary. It's not likely to be 2 years temporary, but probably 6 months, probably until June. We've got a lot of this going on, and the best models that are predicting that hopefully the finances will bounce back by, December. But that being the case, just using that word temporary was really helpful. And I went out of my way throughout the morning when I was communicating with the rest of my patients to use that word. And I would remind you in maybe the internal dialogue that you have at the moment, or maybe the external dialogue that you're having with family and friends there too, to make sure that you're using that word and reminding that it is temporary. I wanted to share with you, since I was very, very little, I've always had incredibly vivid dreams. And not only do I have incredibly vivid dreams, but they have very strong metaphors that run through them. My dreams are a really strong reflection of what's going on in my life. And I feel very grateful because they're often a guide for me. And I wanted to share a dream I had with you. I had the other night. Many of you know Conan, my big black, he's not black, my big German Shepherd. You'll see why I said black in a moment there too. So the dream kind of happened, I'm sort of in my office, a bit like I am at the moment. Now, out to my right-hand side here, I have a big bay window that looks out over the street. I told you the story in a previous episode too about the dog taking a crap out the front there. And I was looking out there. Firstly, what I noticed was what I thought actually was a huge, big black cat, like a kind of, not a lion or tiger type sort of cat, but, a house cat there. But as I looked closer, what I actually noticed was it was a wolf, like this black wolf, and it was walking straight towards my window. And I immediately called Conan. So he's a very big black German Shepherd. He's beautiful and friendly, but he's very protective of us. And when people come at that front window there unannounced, then he can be pretty damn intimidating. And my window was half opened. And so I called him down. There was a real level of fear inside of me as this black wolf was abnormally large. I'm talking Game of Thrones style wolf. And it came to my front window just to my right here, poked its nose through the front window through there. And Conan came running down from the other end of the house, and I was really expecting him to go nuts. But he didn't. He came up to the black wolf, and the two of them kind of noses joined as dogs do. They sniffed at each other, and I was watching on here too. And then the black wolf turned around and it walked ever so calmly off down the street. And I woke up kind of almost immediately after that with this sense of, one, the vividness of that dream and the metaphors inside of that for me. Clearly that black wolf at that time for me represented some of the madness that was going on at the moment. The coronavirus, the changes that are happening in around the financial, the lack of security that many of us had, myself included in there as well. My expectations is that Conan was going to come down and just go berserk at this, but he didn't. He came down very calmly. The two of them sniffed and butted nose together. And then this black wolf, the difficulty that's happening at the moment for me, just walked away ever so calmly. And it reminded me of the importance for me to take that same approach at the moment. Had he come running down here all aggressive like he often does if there's another dog at the front there too, then maybe that would have turned out very different. I know the practice members, the friends, the colleagues of mine that are really fighting against this, that are really butting up against it at the moment, they're the ones that are having the most difficult times. Now, at the moment, I think there's time and opportunity for us to sit peacefully. This is bigger than you and I as individuals that's going on at the moment. I've constantly talked about the opportunity for us to, for us to step into leadership, for us to show compassion, and then for us to give strategies or direction moving forwards. And that dream really reminded me of that. And it reminded me also kind of leading into the other metaphor that I'm using throughout this. For any of you that have ever traveled, and if you've ever traveled in times, airplane travel is what I'm talking about at the moment. None of you are at the moment, none of us are. But if you've ever flown in times of really heavy turbulence, it's interesting to see that what most of the passengers do when there's really, really heavy turbulence is that we look towards the hosts, and we look towards the airline stewards, and we look at them, and I do it all the time too. And if they seem really cool, calm, and collected, then that whole emotion rubs off on everyone on the plane. We put our seatbelts on, we snuggle ourselves down. Now, thank goodness, there's never been a time, and I've been in some pretty heavy turbulence, there's never been a time that I've looked at the airline staff on the plane there too and seen them look worried. Such a great metaphor for us, particularly as health practitioners. The importance to maintain that real centeredness, for us to be in control of our emotion. And in the same way that Conan didn't come running down like a maniac into my room and with real attack and violence towards the black wolf, he was very calm. So I want to invite you to take that approach. I want to invite you to remember temporary is where it's at. And I also want to remind you as well that this is not meant to be easy. Life is not meant to be easy. It's difficult all the time. And this shenanigans that's going on with the coronavirus at the moment has just elevated that for so many of us also. Our focus at the moment, I think, needs to be this, as always, and I'm going to say it on each and every episode there too, is for us to have a commitment to remain centered, to stay as calm as Conan did in that situation there also, for us to show tremendous compassion there as well, and for us to give direction, strategy, and leadership as we move forwards. Gang, this has been another leadership issue of the Marketing Your Practice podcast. As always, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. I'll be back here real soon. Take care. Bye. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me on over at adiomedia.com/join. That's adiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.